Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shadow Self, a Journey Within podcast. Joanne and I are excited to bring you part 2 of our interview with John Savage as he continues to share with us some more in-depth information about working with his shadow self. So sit back and relax, and we hope that you enjoy this episode.
That's when you were talking about the body language and you have to look further into the person.
Yeah, emotions are complicated and it's not just isolated to one particular one that people are feeling. It's often a mix. So trying to sort through that in the moment is kind of frivolous just because there's so much to work through. And this is why psychologists and psychiatrists gets paid so much and have such extensive sessions with their patients, is because it's like knotted twine that you have to unravel. And one of my MOs is to get to the root of the problem in the fastest way possible, kind of like the idea of light travels the path of least resistance. You know, it's not a straight line. You have to be flexible, bendable. You have to allow yourself to permit a certain amount of what people need to get out and express, and just listening to them. Listening is another really important key component. You know, that's like that old adage that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth and we should use them accordingly. No matter how involved people are in their own world, really appreciate when they are able to have a lending ear and be listened to. And it's up to the listener to accept so much and take in so much, because it can be, you know, emotional work is very exhausting at times as well, depending on the intensity of it. And so it's up to that listener to determine how much they're capable of lending for their time and their emotional energy to accept as well. And just being mindful of that and being respectful of that with the other person, letting the other person know how much they're capable of doing, so accepting. And then it's funny, Joanne, because you mentioned the dichotomy of this imbalance between men and women as well. And one thing I've learned to appreciate on a very blanket statement, you know, between men and women when it comes to having emotional conversations, is that typically, and very generic, like I said, is that when men are speaking about emotional issues, there's a friend that's listening, the men are looking for a solution. A lot of times when women are speaking to their friends about emotional issues, they are just talking to get the emotions out, to vent, to just have somebody listen. They don't need a solution. They just want somebody to hear them out. And, you know, it can go both ways. Like men can be like that too, and women can just be looking for a solution too. But the point is that the purpose of emotional expression isn't always to find a solution. Emotions are sometimes just to create that movement to where it's not sitting inside us and we're not feeling like we have to contain it.
And I like the way that you said about the pause earlier, because I'm so fascinated by what you just said.
Thank you.
It's so true, because the emotion is not a bad thing. It just to feel it and get it out. It doesn't mean you're attached to the anger. It doesn't mean you're attached to the sadness or the loneliness or the jealousy. It means you had it for a moment, feel the pause, figure out why you had it, and then move on from it. And you have explained things so eloquently. It's very, very enlightening. And I really like the interaction that you have with people. And then you're taking the body language and you're taking, like, wait a minute, what is that defense mechanism for? Is it a mirror of me? You've hit on so many components.
Oh yes, definitely. Sometimes like we're in such a rush to get rid of this emotion, and other people are, the listener can be in such a rush to just say, okay, I understand that this person is feeling something intensely and I want to give them the time that they need to be heard, but really I just want to get past that and move on to something else. It's like, just taking the focused amount of time of 5 minutes that it may take to really give it that emotion and that person the attention that they need to just sit in that for that time being is all that's needed to actually allow it to release for the movement and the moving on to happen absolutely naturally.
Yes, I agree. I mean, sometimes people just need to express and vent what they're feeling, and then the person that they're venting to or telling what is going on to that other person just needs to listen. Just that's all that person is looking for, someone to listen. And sometimes we're so quick to try to find a solution rather than just listening. And listening is all sometimes is the best medicine.
I completely agree with you.
And sometimes they have to know that they are heard. You can listen but not actually hear somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share with the listeners some of the positive advice that while working with the shadow self? And the reason why I ask this question is because both Todd and I, in our experience with our clients, and when it's first approached, or people are like, "Oh, I'm not going to work with that. That's so negative." It's, "Oh, I've read about that. That's negative," or "My feelings are negative," and it's truly not a negative um, experience. I've worked very in depth with it, and I'm trained in emotional release technique, and I work with my clients with a emotional release technique and the shadow self. And I agree with what you said. If you find the core issue, the root of the issue, allow them slowly to process it and come forth on their own terms. Don't give them an outline. You're not the creator of their space. They're the creator of their space because they're unraveling it. Allow them that sacred space to do that. Could you share with the listeners some of your positive feedback while working with the shadow self?
Of course, I really like this question too, Jan, because just like you said, the shadow self does get a bad rap. It's these dark emotions that are so distasteful for us and uncomfortable that they often get overlooked, and there is this resistance to them. So why would we want to address them? And it's a two-sided coin. It's tricky because they also hold the key to some of the deepest answers that we're looking for on whatever particular journey we are traversing at the time. And be gentle with yourself is the one of the strongest forms of advice I could give, because we're so hard on ourselves to achieve what we are looking for, to try to make the most of things, to try to be the best that we can be, and seeing what is lacking or what isn't, when really it's already there within us and we're just overlooking the process it takes to get there, or we're so focused on what isn't that we fail to see what we already have. So also being grateful for what we have is another key component, and understanding that our deepest fears are also the strongest points of foundation in our character to build upon. And I have a little story with that, if I may share. I went through a period during that 23 to 27 year old part of my life where I like to get to the root of the problem. And I figured that if I'm going to work with my shadow self, then I want to go as deep as I can so that I can work from the bottom up in building a strong, secure foundation so that any storm that passes through, I'll be able to handle. And boy, did I get more than I bargained for. I was not expecting it. I went a little too far, and I don't recommend this for anybody, but I actually went into a kind of state of psychosis where I was having hallucinations. I really tapped into a primal sense of fear. I felt like I was getting followed by quote unquote demonic presences, but really it was just me playing mind games with myself from a unconscious to conscious level that the conscious part of my brain wasn't able to process or comprehend, and the unconscious part was trying to psych myself out as a means of like preparing myself for fear in whatever form it may come, right? And during that time, I had a beautiful meditation. It's going to sound a little twisted, but I'll explain. Basically, I was just climbing this tree, this really thick tree trunk that rose all the way through the sky, kind of like Jack and the Beanstalk. And I was climbing this tree for a while until I reached this branch stretching out from the side of it. And I crawled along this branch to where there's this huge bird's nest. And I fell inside, and I felt like a little baby inside because it was so big. And actually, on the far side of this nest, I found like a 3-year-old kid playing with toy cars and trucks and planes and helicopters. And I realized that it was my 3-year-old self. It was me. And he was having fun and everything. And I was looking at him. And then this little toy helicopter was flying by this kid's head, and the blades of the helicopter sliced the top of this kid's head open, like wide open, like the whole top of the head came off. Me witnessing this in this meditation was horrified. Like, oh my gosh, this poor kid, what just happened? This is gruesome. And the kid didn't have any reaction except for a smile on his face, looking directly at me. And he said, "John, no matter what happens, I'm always here for you, and you have nothing to fear. Everything that you're seeing and witnessing right now is just an illusion to get you to really focus on your heart center and the feeling rather than the visual of what it means to be compassionate. So don't ever worry that you're alone or scared or fear of any kind. I'm always going to be here for you. And when it comes to death, death is just a transition. There's no real finite definition behind it. There's no finalization. It's just one form to another." And ever since then, that image was so strong and has stuck with me that it's really helped for me to fall back upon whenever I feel like things are at their worst. And then I think to myself of that image, and like, things, nothing is worse than witnessing a 3-year-old kid get his head like lopped off by a helicopter blade. And then seeing such a serene look on his face afterwards. So I can handle this. I say to myself, I can handle this. And it helps reinstill that love, and it's like that foundational pillar for me to build upon from then, and I always bounce back. It's very relieving, very reinforcing. Whatever fear you have, trust that you also have whatever it is needed to build upon from that point, and trusting that the universe provides you with exactly what you need.
Wow, that I got chills listening to that. How about you, Joanne?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's just full of love. That's true. Just take
Yep.
the love feeling from that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Johnny. That's so personal, but it really relates to what we're talking about here, right? I mean, it's just that to show the listeners that we all have our own path, but we're all trying to strive for the same thing, which is being loved unconditionally.
And it starts with ourselves. And really, that's what I have found your underlying segment, your underlying ripple to everything is that it truly starts with ourselves. We have to love ourselves first. And in order to love anyone else or drop the mask and get to our shadow selves, doesn't matter how many things you attach yourself to, how many labels are attached to you, unless you truly have unconditional love for self and heart center, everything else is just going to keep going in a circle in a pattern.
That's right. And the cycles do keep coming back around for us to take those chances and opportunities over and over again to make that decision or choice to get closer to what we do truly desire. And just like you both are saying, yes, we can only give as much love to others as we're capable of giving to ourselves. Otherwise, we're just going to exhaust ourselves. So it's so important to start with the self.
Yes, exactly. This conversation has been awesome. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up. Johnny, if the listeners wanted to reach out to you, how might they do that?
Well, you can reach me through email. My business email is Mr. with a MR and then dot the number 3 savage at gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Johnny Savage. And I am going to be creating a few other social platforms for my other businesses starting up. So you can find those through my Facebook page. And well, I just wanted to thank you and Joanne for having me on the show again. I had a really great time. It's been a great conversation, and I wish you the best of luck for your future programs and getting the word out there to the people about embracing the shadow self. Thank you for doing this work. It's so important.
Well, thank you for being with us, Johnny. We're very honored that you gave us some time to do that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Very in depth. It hit on a lot of important points.
My pleasure.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you. Until next time.
Thank you.